If I were to ask you to name some of the best real-time strategy games of all time, I imagine names like Age of Empires, StarCraft and Command & Conquer would probably come to mind. Well, today, allow me to throw a curveball at you in the form of Warzone 2100 to possibly add to that list. So what is Warzone 2100 and what's it all about? The story of the game is typical of the era and plays on the IT fears that surrounded the 80s and 90s. The Americans, yes that's most of you guys, are responsible for setting up the North American Strategic Defense Agency, NASDA, and its orbital nuclear missile deterrent station. There's a malfunction during a routine check, and almost all of humanity is obliterated by the nuclear fallout and the plagues that would follow it. The event is referred to as the Collapse. You, the player, are dropped into the dystopian wasteland of the world where you head up a surviving faction called the Project that hid in the mountains, tasked with rebuilding civilization. You will face challenges such as defeating the remaining human factions who survived the fallout, known as scavengers, and the ever-increasing threat of AI called Nexus, which ends up being the game's main antagonist. The game was developed by Pumpkin Studios and published by Eidos Interactive in April '99 on PlayStation and PC. The competition on PC in the RTS genre was incredible, with some amazing titles still going strong even today, whereas on PlayStation, Warzone 2100 would stand out, if nothing else, simply because it was an RTS game. In fact, Warzone would go on to sell over 5 million copies and would hold the world record for best-selling RTS game on the PlayStation. Despite being praised by critics and achieving great sales, Eidos closed down Pumpkin Studios in March 2000, less than a year after Warzone was released, and official support and further development for the game was terminated. Fast forward a few years, and a fan community group called Noost petitioned Eidos to release the source code for the game, and, rather surprisingly, less than 6 years after its release, Eidos gave the source code to the fans to allow the game to be further developed. Now as an open source, free game, the Warzone 2100 project was in full swing, and fans set about updating and replacing many elements of the game, and that's where we find ourselves today. The latest version of the game, 4.55, is available via the official community project website, wz2100.net. You can download another version of the game from Steam. However, it's not the latest version and I would probably avoid it, as there seems to be some negative community kerfuffle around its release, suggesting it may have been just someone trying to take all the credit. When it was originally released, on the surface at least, it didn't necessarily stand out too much, yet under the hood, it brought in a few innovative features. The game has a fully rotating and zooming 3D camera, 3D units, 3D terrain, immense unit customizations, and fairly smart AI. Unit mechanics and maps were interactive, with map terrain affecting the units with realistic line of sight, projectile range, mapping, and AI pathfinding. All of this is built on by the superb Ibis 3D graphics engine, which was developed by Sam Kerbach from Eidos. In a nutshell, looking at some of the other games that were released around the same time, such as Command & Conquer Tiberium Sun, Total Annihilation Kingdoms, and Age of Empires 2, Warzone 2100 actually had a lot going for it, and I can see why fans were keen to continue developing the game long after the studio killed it. It wasn't the finished article, but it had potential. So after visiting the website and downloading the latest version of the game, I firstly cracked on with the campaign mode. The campaign mode has been remastered by the community, and there are also another few additional campaigns, such as Fractured Kingdom and Reclamation, you can play as well. The game follows the project's mission to recover pre-nuclear fallout technology and rebuild civilization. You, the player, command Team Alpha based in Arizona, fighting the advanced New Paradigm faction, only to discover that a self-aware virus known as Nexus is the real threat. After defeating the New Paradigm, the player joins Team Beta in Chicago to battle the Collective, another faction under Nexus's control. The campaign escalates when Nexus launches nuclear missiles, forcing a retreat to Gamma Base. Upon arrival, the player survives an ambush by Nexus-controlled forces and develops countermeasures against the virus. Nexus then seizes NASDA satellites for orbital strikes, but the project captures a missile site to neutralize the threat. It is revealed that Dr. Reed, a disgraced scientist, uploaded himself, like Johnny Depp, into a court case and became the Nexus virus which caused the nuclear apocalypse. Now, if this was based in the UK, the guy would have probably joined a trade union, gone on strike and been given a 30% pay increase by our woeful government, thus avoiding all the nonsense in the first place. However, in a final onslaught, all three teams unite to defeat Nexus and secure humanity's future. The end. So ultimately, the story isn't actually about the AI going rogue and destroying humanity, such as in the Terminator. The story is all about a human going rogue and using AI to destroy humanity. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the campaign mode itself is actually pretty well executed. It's 20-time missions of testing the player's different tactical approaches to situations and their understanding of utilising units, whilst having a conscious need to find artefacts and complete vital research to strengthen their army going forward. The campaign is not merely a story to follow and complete. There are consequences further down the line if you don't complete vital R&D you need to. I guess this type of campaign mode is more interesting because it's very rare you get 10 missions in and think, damn, I wish I would have done more research 5 missions ago. Well, Warzone 2100 is that type of game. The story of the game, I think, is a little bit convoluted, but overall, 25 years on, you have to say there is a certain truth about AI being blamed for problems, when in fact there is always a person behind it pulling the strings. There's also the challenge mode, where you can try to really test your abilities by being pitted against different factions with different conditions in what are basically preset skirmishes. Moving on to the skirmish mode, which is where you usually can find me. The game comes with a reasonable amount of maps that range from 2 to 10 teams. The map previews aren't really very useful, to be honest, other than your starting positions you can't really see much. However, there are a ton of maps that you can download online, so I would highly recommend you go and have a look on the website there as well. Once you've picked out a map, you have the option to add in scavengers if you want. Remember, these are the remaining people who inhabit the Earth, so sticking to the game's lore, you might want to add them in. If you want to allow diplomacy so teams can move around, you can do, but I'm always in it for myself. Then you can choose whether to have a much more abundant source of power and start with much more larger and advanced bases. There's the option to set a limit on certain structures being built as well. Once you click on Start Hosting Game, it opens up an easy to miss menu called Tech. You can raise or lower the starting tech level here, so you might want to skip doing all the research and have a faster game. Moving on to team selection, you can choose what team number and faction you want to be part of. You have the option to play as the human race, the collective or nexus. Each team has the same unit roster, but the buildings and textures are a little bit different for each team. Then you can choose the level of AI to play against, and there are a few options here. You have what I'm guessing are updated originals such as Nexus and Cobra for new players like me. You also have Bone Crusher AI, which appears to be the hardest, and Nullbot on Adaptive AI. If you really want to get your ass kicked, go ahead and pick Bone Crusher. Starting the game, I'll quickly run through how the game works and the interface you're presented with. On the left, you have the command panel, which is made up of 6 different interfaces. Your factory tab to build units, your research tab, your build tab for base structures, your unit design interface, your intelligence display for game stats or mission objectives, and the center button, which seems to just close everything. On the right, you have your minimap, which alerts you to oil derricks, artifacts, and any unit movements and battles that's occurring. By the way, your minimap is not immediately available unless you start with a higher level of tech, otherwise you'll need to build a command center to activate it. At the bottom of the screen, you have your power resource bar. Power is your income resource in this game and is accumulated by first building derricks on oil sites and then generators to power those derricks. You have no resource income without both of these going at the same time. Your resources are flowing by the second and also stored for you to spend. The bar will also display a warning if you require more power generators to power your oil extractors. You also have a unit group screen, which will become very useful for coordinating your attacks later on. On the top right of your screen, you also have the game options, which include an extensive game guide that you can flick through and learn as you go. As you gain experience, it's also worth checking out the long list of keyboard shortcuts to make your gameplay quicker and more dynamic, especially when you need to be a bit faster and progress with your base and move different units around during the battle engagements. The general goal of early stages of the game is to capture as many oil sites as you can, as quickly as you can, whilst building up your generators and factories. Just be aware that the AI already knows the location of all of the oil sites, as in my experience at least, it sends construction units directly to all of them immediately. Build your derricks and generators and voila, you have power. Now you want to be trying to conduct as much research as possible, as quickly as you can, and building and upgrading your army rapidly. And that's where this particular game does really stand out, even by today's standards. There are over 400 technologies to research and extensive tech trees to follow. I've never seen anything that compares with this amount of research you can do in one game. If you know one, feel free to drop it in the comments. Every time you research an item, say a flamer or a cannon, you'll unlock a complementary research item, i.e. upgraded bullets or another more powerful cannon to research. Honestly, the research never seems to end, and if you like this kind of progressive tech war, then it's right up your street. Research projects will vary massively from armour plating, bullets, engines, tank treads, jet and hover propulsion systems, to the gigantic mass driver turret fortresses and the laser satellite command post, which will eventually enable you to fire an ion cannon-like weapon anywhere on the map that you please. You can very easily get lost in the volume of research, so it's important to have a strategy for your development. You may favour long-range mortar weapons, or close-up flamethrowers, or maybe both. And this is where the rabbit hole goes even deeper. You start with no tank designs, so you'll have to design each type of unit you want from scratch. You do have a preset options of cyborgs, but they generally support tank units in combat. You'll have to choose what type of chassis the unit has, how it's powered, i.e. its propulsion, and what type of weapon, sensor or module it carries on top. You'll then get a whole host of information about how much the unit costs, its hit points, its range, the damage it deals, the rate of fire, and the weight of the thing, which will affect its speed. This means with so many technologies available and so many combinations of builds available, you truly can have a unique army at your disposal. The tech tree in the game is invisible, but if you go to the website there is an extensive resource page that lists out all of the research paths and projects for you. When you're researching, just remember that research takes both time and resources, so you will need to factor that into your plans. Moving on to the command tabs, your military units will have the options for you to modify their behaviours, such as range of attack, or whether the unit fights to the death or retreats when sustaining heavy damage. You can tell the unit to attack everything or hold fire. You can tell it to patrol, pursue, guard or hold position. You can tell it to return to HQ for repairs or even for recycling, so that you don't lose all of the valuable resources you spend and its experience is then passed on to its replacement unit. I think these are actually very good ideas and well incorporated into the game. Now there are a few other aspects to building your army and your base, like building expansion modules on your generators for more power, research modules for faster research, and factory modules to allow you to build bigger units. Whether you want to build cyborgs, tanks, hovercrafts or VTOL units, walls, bunkers or fortresses, this game has pretty much everything you could ever need. When your units are in combat, they will also gain experience from the battle. Basically every unit can level up 8 times, which will also give that unit better accuracy, make it faster and take less damage. So you can go from having a crappy stormtrooper who's pretty useless to a veteran commando like Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is pretty devastating, thus again rewarding the player for keeping resource management at the very forefront of their mind. Many units and defensive structures will also have the reloading or rearming times, so they can't just keep firing or bombing infinitely. Also, when you're in combat, it's important to have a diverse group of units, as your tactics will involve firing from long range, then medium range, and then finally getting up close and personal, so you'll need to design units for these different purposes. It's important to constantly have your army moving, either attacking or retreating, always probing for a weakness and firing whilst on the run, doing what I call free damage. There are several things to note before you really do get stuck in. The game is from the 90s, and despite a mountain of hard work from the community, it does show its age. Visually, the graphics appear boxy, and if you zoom in close, the HD textures can often pixelate a bit. Having said that, the overall textures of the game are quite nice. The game aesthetics all perfectly fit in the narrative of the world shattered by nuclear war, from the wastelands to the cities. There is plenty of scorched earth and craters to create a genuine feel of post-apocalypse. The human army appears more industrial, using what they had, whereas the Nexus and Collective appear a bit more futuristic. Scavengers also look as you would expect, with thrown together tech and basic bases. There are some nice animations like rolling skies and rain that splashes in larger bodies of water, for instance. There's also day and night cycles and shadows all facing the correct direction as well. You can destroy buildings, but they do comically shake as you attack them. There are some nice smaller details too, like the Tesla coil-like electricity, smoke from factories and rotating satellite dishes. The explosion animations are pretty decent too, although when a unit dies, it tends to sort of just fall apart like my kid's Lego, and some of the pathfinding of the units can go a bit crazy at times. I do like the end of game details. The victory equals a fireworks display above your base and a rotating camera, which is pretty cool, but it does make me a bit dizzy. Speaking of which, the camera is very good, and after being patched numerous times, it's quite smooth and easy to rotate and zoom around. Now to briefly just discuss the music of the game. With the original game, there weren't too many tracks. The tracks were composed by Martin Seven and stuck to the kind of post-apocalyptic industrial feel of the game. The game has obviously been patched and updated many times, and the latest version has a lot more tracks added by the composer Lupus Mechanicus. All of the soundtracks are great quality and stay true to the kind of industrial-like vibe the game portrays. I'll be honest, none of the music really grabs hold of you like it does in, say, a more modern game like Beyond All Reason, but the vibes of the music do make you feel like you are rebuilding and rediscovering the old world, not moving forward as such, so in that respect it is very much on point. Multiplayer is a little bit more of an unknown quantity for me, although the Discord page is very much active, almost to the minute, indicating a large community, and if I load up the multiplayer lobbies at any given point, there's always people waiting to play. Now, I did say earlier to avoid the Steam version if you can, however the game has been given a 90% approval rate, which is still great considering the community backlash. According to the main WZ2100.net site, the game has been downloaded around 5 million times, which speaks volumes for how good and popular this game still is. The game has definitely surprised me, and I really mean that. I stumbled upon it via my research on the modern 0K game and found a 90s game that was technically ahead of its time but didn't really stand out the crowd as much, as it seemed to be just a collection of established ideas and themes. The community, however, saw the potential of it and have poured in the efforts to update it so that it reaches its ultimate potential. Credit to IDOS as well for giving it back to the fans. Yes, graphically it has hit its ceiling a long time ago, but the game offers RTS fans a very challenging and intricate experience with good pacing and one which is constantly evolving and escalating. Battles can be very long, determined by either masterful player tactics, effective and smart upgrades, or by designing new and improved units and deploying them when most effective. Yes, the game does lack some functions that popular modern RTS games have, but the rest is all there, and it's very impressive. To conclude, the best compliment I can give this game is that I was raised on the RTS nectar that is Total Annihilation, and if you've seen my other videos, you'll know I talk about it like it's the baby Jesus, probably a bit too much. I've always been 100% sure that it was the very best of 90s RTS gaming, particularly in the sci-fi genre. After playing this and experiencing the absolute mountain of possibilities, the base building, unit design, large-scale war strategy and battle tactics, and how easy the game is to actually become addicted to, I'm left wondering if Warzone 2100 is actually one of the very best RTS games to have quietly and slowly emerged from that golden era, and in truth, only the fans of the game actually realised its potential at the time. Sure, it's not the original game as it was, it's dated and it is a bit flawed, but even today it's a damn good game and well worth your time playing. There are so many games produced now that don't have 10% of the depth this game offers to its players. I would recommend trying it for yourself, maybe donate to the cause if you wish. Thanks for watching the video, please like and subscribe to help my channel grow, and drop your thoughts about Warzone 2100 in the comment section, as I'm always keen to see what experienced players and fans of the game think. See you next time!